Ooh, look at that. A cemetery. But there's a lot of orgies in there. What? There was a cemetery back there. Oh. And I bet inside it, there are a bunch of people fucking the shit out of each other. At least that's how it was in my hometown. That's kind of weird, don't you think? I bet it does sound weird now. Now it's illegal to even tell a girl she's pretty or grab her, but yes, believe it or not, there was a time in this country when teenagers weren't just on their phones, they were in cemeteries fucking the shit out of each other. We called it the 90's. Seems kind of disrespectful. Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I had some of the best times of my life out there, but also some of the worst. Lost my parents out there. You what? Oh, yeah. I lost my parents out there. Sure as anything. Surprised? I sure am. Surprised this has never come up. Oh, I don't rehash the past. I mean, it was the swinging 90's, you know? Back then, it wasn't unheard of for a couple of teenagers to hang out at the cemetery and close your ears if this offends you, but yes, smoke a little reefer from time to time. Then, leave and cross town to where my childhood home was, you know, to where it stood. Lure my parents outside with a story about me, their only son, getting hurt in the cemetery. Then, fuck the shit out of them once there. Really? And I mean literally. Fuck them until shit came out, because that's what happens when you die. You shit. You know, no one tells you that, but you do. Almost everybody shits themselves when they die. I have actually heard that. Certainly never in this context. And after they fuck the shit out of them, those crazy teens, you know. You have to understand, they had probably just got finished listening to Nirvana, you know. But sure as anything, after they fucked the shit out of my parents, they turned right around and fucked the shit. They fucked the shit. Yeah, again, the context is certainly new. It was a different time. It seems like you have a real good attitude about it. I do now. I didn't at the time, of course. Different time. There were 3 years there, right at the tail end of the 90's, right after my parents got the shit fucked out of them, that I was in a real bad way. I bet. Wasn't until they came back that I turned the corner. Bet that sounds strange now. Yeah. I mean, this was the 90's. It wasn't unheard of for a couple of parents to get the shit fucked out of them, die, come back. I heard about it. Not me. Well, I'll never forget. It was the tail end of the 90's. I think about 2001. I remember because 9/11 had just happened, and on account of my parents had come back from the dead. And even prior to that miracle, I kept thinking, what's going on, you know? Like, what kind of God would let all this happen? You got my parents fucked to shit on hallowed ground. You got 9/11's going on, women getting grabbed, apartheid. What kind of God thinks all that's just fine, you know? I would think that, and I would scream that just about everywhere I went. And I don't know if God heard me, but my parents sure did. Oh, yeah. Turns out a dead body can still hear you. It just takes a little longer for them to understand you. Because they don't really hear it, you know? No ears. They feel it in their bones. It took about 3 years for my parents to feel what I'd been saying all about town. And when they did, they said to themselves, hey, yeah, our death was a travesty of no small nature. We ought to rise up and make a big stink. And sure as anything, they did. My parents, they rose up and brought a vengeance upon the teens fucking in the cemetery. Well, that's great. It wasn't, you know. It was great to have my parents back. And of course it was a miracle, but it was also the day that I myself had lost my virginity in that very cemetery. Really? I was surprised as you. I mean, of all days, I'd been working myself up to it, you know. Took a lot of courage for me to lie with a woman in that great place of rest. For sure. I call it an emotional milestone, no doubt. Then you got my parents, risen from the dead, as if by the will of an interventionist God. It's tough. Oh yeah, I mean, they slayed my love. Them and a risen soldier who passed in the Civil War, risen by God's hand. I don't know what that means in the macro about the Civil War, but yes, he was also selected by God to rise, and yes, he was a Confederate general, and he wasn't in it for states' rights. He said so. He said, "I'm racist only." And then he asked my girlfriend if she was Irish, which unfortunately for her she was. He was going to kill me too, but my parents dissuaded him. They took me home. I walked home, and they sort of shambled after me in their skeletal gait, but we got home, you know. Once home, I showed them the endless reel-to-reel coverage of 9/11. They said, "Oh my God, this is a catastrophe." And I said, "Mommy, Daddy, don't worry about it." And they said, "Son, what?" So I said again, "Don't worry. This is all going to be okay." They said, "Son, this is the first attack on the American mainland since Pearl Harbor." I said, the first so far. And they were like, "Son, yeah. I don't know if you're feeling the gravity of this national moment. This is the start of a civilization war between the U.S. and the Middle East, which will probably survive you." And I said, "For a time it will. And then I'll come back." You see, this was the beginning of my good attitude. I told my parents, "Look, I know it doesn't seem like it right now. Seems like God's a bad guy for letting all this slide, but this is actually the best day of all time. I know there's 9/11s and people getting fucked to shit, women getting grabbed, and there's O.J. Simpson, but today, God put an end to death, He brought back my daddy and my mommy and a horrible, racist warrior. And somewhere in the cruel randomness of that scheme lies the brilliance of God's plan, which is that He has one, Sure, not everybody had a great day on 9/11 or 9/12 and all the way on to 9/31. Maybe God the Father was listening to Nirvana those days. I really don't know, and it really don't matter so long as God's got a plan to fix it. A crazy, nonsensical, chimeric plan, like He hatched on that most fateful of September days. He's gonna bring us back. There's no way He'd stop with my mother and father and key members of the Confederacy. There's no way God would save one man while the next toils in catastrophe. If He did, that would mean God was the devil. And that can't be true, can it? It's possible. Not if you ask me. I got a positive attitude. An attitude I got on September 11th. Watching news coverage with my daddy and mama. I remember my daddy raised a skeletal finger to my upper lip and wiped the milk away and said, "Hey, you're right, son!" His voice had become high-pitched in death, almost like a woman's, but I didn't judge, I was still happy to have him back. But he was agreeing with me. I don't know how long it'll take, but the good men and women struck down on 9/11 will live on in our hearts and minds, and they will literally rise from the dead and wreak havoc on the people of Iraq. He said that because at that point, news media had led him to believe that the Iraqi people were those who had rained death upon us. Really, they only had oil. It was a hole. No, I remember. Then they went back to the cemetery and killed all the teens who were fucking there. They might still be here today if the groundskeeper hadn't come upon them with a chainsaw or turned them to dust. It's crazy, huh? Oh, for sure. And here, I thought he was terrible at his job. Well, even a broken clock. Even a broken clock. And even the teenagers knew better than to go back to the cemetery after that. They began having their orgies and barbecues in the safety of their homes. Then, shortly after that, the smartphone came out and ended sexuality altogether. But if you ask me, it was the 1-2 punch of my parents rising from the dead and 9/11 that really ended the 90's. But that's fine. Everything ends. Till it comes back. Till it comes back. That's right, son. That's right. That's what we always say. Till it comes back. And it will. That's why I don't get upset when national tragedies happen or earthquakes ravage the coasts or there's COVID, you know. It's gonna get better. Just give it time. People tell me I'm crazy. I say, hell man, I'm not crazy. I just lived through the 90's is all. Okay.